Good morning, everyone. I am Doctor Anita. Thank you so much for joining us for our very first nSanity check with Doctor Anita. This is the show that allows me to think out loud and ask the question, is this crazy or is it just me? And I am so excited to be joined by my co-contributors. First of all, my co-executive producer, Eloy Garcia, my social media and marketing manager, Shar Perry, and my branding director, Mr. Adrian Pastor. Guys, how are we doing this morning?
Good.
Everybody had a good weekend?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Well, what we're going to talk about today is Mr. Kanye West's decision to run for president. Now, before I go any further, I want to make it very clear that this is not about disrespecting his position. It's not about disrespecting him in any way. I'm just curious to know, is it crazy or is it just me that it doesn't seem like there's someone in his inner circle who might say, are you sure you want to make this announcement? So, Sharday, what do you think is going on behind the scenes that we may or may not be aware of that someone thought this was okay to go along with?
I have to imagine it's a struggle. I can't not see his family and his friends sitting down and having a conversation with him and telling him, I don't think this is the right time, or I don't think this is the best way to go about it. But I feel like he must be so strong-willed that no matter what they say, he's still going forward. And maybe it comes down to you're either with me or you're against me. And in fear of losing him, they kind of just go along and try to mitigate where they can.
Okay, I can see that. Eloy, if that's the case, how do we support someone like that who we don't necessarily think is doing the right thing, but at the same time might be giving us the ultimatum to say either you're for me or against me?
That is a really difficult decision to make because no one wants to have to choose, right, between a loved one and their well-being. And I think it's important to inform ourselves. We need to do our best to figure out why our loved ones are going through what they're going through. Oftentimes these diagnoses stem from trauma, unresolved trauma. It could have happened in childhood. It could have continued to happen through adulthood. And when it's unresolved, it festers and it grows in ways that can become uncontrollable. So we should inform ourselves about why people go through what they go through so we can position ourselves in their life in places where we can talk them down the ledge, where we can soothe them in ways that aren't going to be so manic.
Doesn't that seem, though, to insinuate that they don't know what they're doing or what they really want, and that maybe we just don't happen to see things the way they see them? What do you think, Adrian? Is there a different way to look at this?
When I think about the sort of situation that he's in and, where he's at as a person, when we look at Kanye West, he has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So there's definitely that factor that takes a big role in, what's going on in terms of his presidential bid, in terms of all the things that he's saying. When I think about this, the first thing that comes to mind is codependency. And I think about how as his, inner circle is sort of encouraging him to move forward with his presidential bid and, not necessarily guarding him in the way that maybe they should be, I immediately think that they're sort of enabling a codependent relationship in a way, in the sense that they know that he has this pre-existing condition, and yet they're just sort of fostering, the growth of it for him to continue to say things and, put himself in a position where maybe he shouldn't be. So I think in some ways, they should be looking out for him. They should be thinking about this condition. They should be thinking about, how that's going to affect his condition and how that's going to affect other people hearing him speak. And it's difficult. It's difficult, the position that his inner circle and that his family is in and his loved ones. But, they have to think about those things when in this specific situation.
You mentioned the fact that he's got bipolar disease, and just so our audience, or bipolar, how did you put that, Adrian? Bipolar disorder. And just to inform our audience, none of us are pretending to be experts in this field. Again, I said this at the beginning, none of us are intending to be critical, but I'm thinking out loud, exploring the reasons why someone in his inner circle might not have advised him against this. And I could, I'm making assumptions here, but I'm just wondering how someone could allow him to go forward. That being said, I also want to share this perspective with you. When he came out with his first gospel CD, a lot of people in the Christian community really came down on him. It's not going to last. It's a gimmick, this, that, and the other. We need to be clear that no one knows the heart of any man other than God. We don't even know our own intentions sometimes, because sometimes we don't understand what drives us. So this conversation is not about bashing Mr. Kanye West. That's not it at all. I'm just trying to understand what possibly could be going on in his inner circle that they've encouraged him, or maybe not encouraged him, but allowed him, or I might not even be choosing the right words right now, but it just seems that someone in that type of position would have people around them to be able to advise them and say, this might not be the best thing to do. That being said, though, I think maybe Adrian alluded to this, where you've got someone who has bipolar disorder. They're not necessarily going to be in a position to want to listen to anyone else because they feel so strongly and they believe so passionately about what they're doing. So, Sade, do you happen to know of any situations like this that we could refer to that would help us understand how he was enabled to make this announcement? Because I don't think, number one, in terms of how our presidential process is structured, that he's actually going to be able to put in a reasonable bid for president. I think it's just too late. But number two, how do people that have someone in their lives that behave this way typically help or manage them? What are your thoughts?
I feel like the best way to go about this is through care and concern and love. I think about people that have interventions and they take everyone that's closest to them and they sit around and they tell them how their actions are affecting them and how their actions are affecting everyone as a whole. And so I imagine anyone coming from this perspective, the best that they can do is to sit down and let them know, I love you and I support you and I think you're capable. I just think there's a different way to go about this. And maybe even offering some different perspectives. This is what I think. And then we bring in, your best friend, your sister, your brother, your cousin, or someone else that can give them options. So we're not just limiting them, but we're letting them know, hey, there's a couple other ways to go about this. Let's work together. And so it kind of feels like they're a part of the team. They're part of the discussion, as opposed to we're putting you in a corner and this is your only option.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is also making the assumption that these people are already in the inner circle and they have a trusted relationship with the person who's making these types of decisions. Eloy, again, with the assumption that people are already in the inner circle, how would you recommend that they go about even broaching this situation, this discussion with this person?
I think it's important to call a thing. Like Adrian said, he brought up the diagnosis. We need to call a thing. We need to be able to identify what we're dealing with so that we can identify how to deal with it. And like Shar is saying, we need to call people in, not call people out. A lot of these situations that we end up with, behavioral and physical health or mental health, is because they've been unchecked. We haven't had the tools and the skills we need to reel ourselves in, to reel our community in. But when we can start with compassion and kindness, like Shar is saying, and we can add in the truth, which is what we're going through. Is it a depressive episode? Is it a manic episode? What exacerbated the episode? Then we can bring it down to specific situations that we can deal with daily and have it not blow up into something that seems unattainable and uncontrollable.
The expertise that I do bring to the table, and I'm going to be coming to you in a minute, Adrian, is the fact that I understand about psychological safety and the factors that are involved in that. Our need for security, our need for autonomy, our need for a sense of fairness, our need for esteem, and then our need for trust. And understanding how much the loss of his mother impacted him, that might have to do with his sense of esteem. I don't know the man. I'm just, again, trying to share based on my expertise and trying to understand or begin to understand where this is taking place, how it's taking place, what the dynamics look like. Adrian, when you think about a sense of esteem, how can those in the inner circle help someone with their esteem and yet not necessarily buy into something that may not be the best thing for them? What do you think?
like I said before, it is sort of a really tricky situation because you're dealing with not necessarily your everyday person. Like we're mentioning Esteem. Kanye West is somebody that is really well known, pretty much a household name, I would say. Like everybody knows who he is. He's a very famous musician, and you are stuck in a really difficult place. The thing that I immediately think about is other celebrities or other people in the public sphere that have gone through like very public mental health battles. I think of like Britney Spears. I think of Amanda Bynes. I think of just other celebrities who have gone through similar struggles, and um, that situation is really difficult. And I don't always think that answer is black and white. You look at people like Britney Spears, and I think it's since 2008 she's been in a legal conservatorship with her family, because during the time of her really big mental health breakdown in like 2007 2008, she was essentially considered like incapacitated and had to be cared for in a way. And is that what is going to be the ticket for Kanye West? I don't know. It's difficult to say for him because everybody's situation is so different. I think, sort of like we've been alluding to, you have to handle every sort of situation with the utmost care. But I think for them, because his inner circle does include, other public figures. You have Kim Kardashian, you have her entire family as well, and it's hard for them to navigate. But I think the best thing that they can do, and I mean, I'm sure they're already aiming to do it this way anyways, just to be as private as possible. And if they can, reel him back in and pull him back from the public sphere in whatever way that they can, because clearly when you look at this man, you can recognize that he needs healing and he needs help in some kind of way. And yeah, it seems like the opposite is being done, at least from the outside. And again, that's no disrespect to him or to his journey whatsoever, but somebody dealing with his circumstances, I don't think should be, in the situation that he's in right now.
I think that so far this has been a tremendous conversation because based on what I know in my field of specialty, which is human and organization systems, and then based on Shardae's ability just to be able to frame something in a way that everyone can understand it from just a regular perspective. And then Eloy's a way of saying, well, these are the actions that we can take. But then coming to Adrian always seems to have a different way of seeing things. And I'm so glad, Adrian, that you mentioned the other celebrities that are going through this, facing the same challenges. Again, to my audience, we are not here to bash Conway. As a matter of fact, I'm here to say, as people from the outside looking in, we really need to be careful about how we talk about people like Kanye or Britney Spears or Justin Bieber or anyone else in the public eye that seems to behave in ways that we might think are crazy, that seems to behave in ways that we might think, well, they're just doing that because they have celebrity status. No, we can't judge from the outside what's going on in someone's inner circle, what's going on in their mind, most importantly, what's going on in their heart. Again, I started this conversation saying only God can judge the heart. God made us. Sometimes we don't understand what drives ourselves. But I really want us to be careful about how we judge the outward appearance of others. We don't know their journey. We don't know what they're going through. We don't know what they're dealing with. And so the main purpose of this particular discussion was to be able to say, be careful. Just be careful. Hold back on your judgment. And remember, we're all healing. We're all going through something. We're all taking a different walk. This journey of life, if we all had it wrapped up and tied up in a bottle, there's a whole lot of things that we would have done differently. I'm sure everyone on this call right now can say that. There are a whole lot of other different decisions that we would have made. But life is what it is. And I think especially now in this time, when we're in a completely different world that none of us knows how to navigate, we're dealing with volatility in the stock market. We're dealing with uncertainty as to what the new normal is going to be. We're dealing with complexity as to how we're going to manage this thing. And we're dealing with ambiguity. What is tomorrow going to look like, let alone next week, let alone next month, let alone where are we going to be this time next year? There's a lot of factors to take into consideration as we're living life. So what I'd like to direct the panel's attention to now is Are there any situations in your life where it looks like somebody's doing something crazy? You just kind of think, well, as someone in their inner circle, there's something I should be doing or saying. Sharday, let's start with you.
Absolutely. I can think of a handful of people in my life right now that are reacting to the circumstances that we're in as far as COVID-19 and the safety precautions that we need to take. And I think it's a difficult conversation because, as you stated, we are not professionals. I don't have all of the answers. All I can say is this is what it looks like from my point of view. And I just want you to know that I love you and that I support you. I don't even want to say but, because I feel like that is taken away from that. And I think there are a couple other ways that we can do this. I, for instance, have been using my resources. I have been using my support systems. I have been learning new hobbies, whatever I can kind of offer from this is what I'm doing. Maybe you could try that too, has been my approach.
I like that. I like that very much. It sounds like a holistic approach that you're applying to yourself. Eloy, how about you?
Yeah, I find it important not to question so much, because I find people's decision making, when it seems out of character, like you're saying, because they're obviously going through something that I can't see or hear or feel, or for whatever reason we aren't sharing with each other, which is fine. So not questioning so much why they're doing it, but more so monitoring their being and how they are behaving throughout the process. Are they happier? Did they move? Did they do a sudden change of careers? But are they happier now? Do they have what they've always wanted? Or does it seem like what they're doing isn't adding up to what they're saying? So being patient, also taking a step back, letting people figure it out for themselves as well, and not causing so much doubt within them by bringing up so many questions about why they're going through what they're going through, and letting them show us in healthy ways as well, by just showing them that they can trust us and they're safe with us.
That is huge. Safety. That goes back to one of those psychological safety factors about what it is that we can do to build trust for those that we love, so that they know we're here for us in any capacity that they need. Adrian, what are your thoughts?
Safety is what resonated with me so much, so because it's really true, and it hits home for everybody. You can't heal in a way or continue to share your healing process or journey if you don't feel safe, I think. And I've met a lot of different people coming from different walks of life and different situations, and I think everybody can agree that if you don't necessarily feel safe where you're at, it just makes everything 10 times harder. You need that sense of safety, and we have to think of ways that we can create that environment, we can create that safe space for those people that are around us. And I can definitely think of a couple of situations where maybe I could be helping to create that sort of space in better ways, and things that I can do to look inside of myself. What have I done that hasn't necessarily done the best at creating that safe space, sort of examining my actions and things like that. So definitely safety and thinking about that. But I definitely do. I can see examples in my life as well that I need to work on.
This is what I love about coming to you last, Adrian, because you always make me think of things in a completely different dynamic than when I had originally started. And that you're saying, it's less about the person, more about what can I do to make them feel safe enough to show up, and whatever showing up means to them at that particular moment. So we're going to pause the conversation here. We're going to pick it up. And when we do, I will be coming from my area of expertise, and we're going to make it a little more personal. I have decided that nSanity Check is not just going to be discussing what's going on out there, but after we've discussed that to the extent that we can, I do want to come from my professional background and make it personal to all of us, if you all are comfortable with that. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. I'm excited about that. Well, this is our first show and our first episode. We're starting off talking about Mr. Kanye West's decision to run for president and what might have been going on in his inner circle. We're going to continue the conversation. We're going to pick up on psychological safety and see how that impacts our decisions and the things that we do and how that impacts our inner circle and how they're there to help us. I want to thank my co-contributors, Eloy, Shar, and Adrian. I'm looking forward to seeing you all for the next show. And we're going to wrap up this month with a special subject matter expert, Dr. Cherie Montgomery, who's going to talk with us about mental health and wellness, particularly in communities of color. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real. Thanks for joining us.